Welcome back to Strange Forum. Today, we are going to be looking at the ever-elusive G.I. Joe Classified 81. Yes, the all-too-difficult-to-find Amazon-exclusive Cobra EEL. Sold for half a second on the Hasbro Pulse site and then periodically showing up on Amazon.com to frustrate scalpers over the last 3 months, the Cobra EEL has become an angry talking point for G.I. Joe Classified fans globally. Now, in Hasbro's defense, they do seem to have heard the fans, and successive figure releases have been much smoother, but that doesn't change the fact that the EEL never should have been released in such low numbers in the first place. It smacks of Hasbro trying to engineer demand. It's my personal belief that if you're going to number figures in a checklist style, you should only make variants and repaints the chase figures. Nothing annoys collectors quite like having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, and many drop out of the line altogether when they can't find an elusive number. But all of that being said, let's get into it and see if the figure is really worth all the hype. Personally, I'm going to miss the windowless packaging. I actually enjoy the unboxing of these quite a bit, and really like the surprise of seeing the figure in person for the first time, but I understand the counterpoint of being able to see the paint scheme and the quality of the figure before you purchase it. That being said, I'm not too terribly impressed with the packaging for Mutt and Junkyard, but we'll see when it comes closer to release. As for this one, we have the figure and the art back, as well as the beloved cardboard loot crate. I have to say right off, the figure is quite striking. Something about the big red and white Cobra logo causes this one to, aesthetically, swim circles around Torpedo, his Aquatic Joe counterpart. This one definitely has a cool factor, but a $25 to $30 markup cool factor? Not really, though I guess that's true of many figures of this line. You pay what the market will bear. But I think there's a big difference between hunting down an out-of-production figure and having to pay an enormous markup because someone was spamming Amazon more quickly than you could. These figures are beautifully made, but they aren't that hard to produce, and I hope that Hasbro stops this FOMO game before it ends up tanking the line by overly frustrating buyers. In his accessory pouch, we see all of the EEL's intricate diving apparel. There is a very 1960s James Bond sea adventure look to all of this, and I definitely hope we get more diving figures because I would love to see some of the yellows, blues, and oranges presented in some of the older G.I. Joes. All in all, I really do love the figure except for one thing. Something that's bugging me to no end, but I will get into that in a moment. As for articulation, he has pretty standard classified joints, though somewhat less encumbered having a more sleek outfit. And that articulation is as follows: a double joint at the elbow, a 2-stage joint at the shoulder, pivot and swivel at the jawline, as well as at the base of the neck, pivot at the wrists, as well as swivel. The wrist joints have a hinge that allow it to rock up and down, but not side to side. I think this is to accommodate holding the spear gun at waist length, but unfortunately this is one of those figures that really should have had an extra pair of hands, namely hands in a swimming or scooping position. So hopefully we'll get that with the retro release. Forward and backward crunch at the midsection, swivel at the waist, a 2-stage joint at the knees, double ball joint at the hips, a swivel at the upper thigh, as well as a pivot and rotation at the feet, which allow for tiptoe positions so that the diving flippers don't look awkward. For accessories, we have a relatively detailed pair of scuba fins with a hole in the bottom to accommodate peg stands. The top and bottom of the fins have details so that he can be posed in swimming positions without the bottoms of his feet looking awkward. We have his diving knife that fits in the sheath on his leg. I enjoy how the profile of this blade looks really mean and that the handle does look like a scuba knife. Next, we have his oxygen tank and propellant system. I do like that they added some color details to this, and the black and white eel symbol is a nice addition. However, I'm disappointed that they didn't add any watery blast effects, as there are peg holes at the bottom of the pack ready to take them on. Like I've said before, Hasbro, if you're listening, please start releasing Pulse accessory packs. I would definitely buy a pack full of blast effects, missiles, guns, or other accessories. You have over 100 figures out now. It's time. Next up, we have the helmet and the rebreather. There is an excellent amount of detail on this little helmet, from the ship gray to the black highlights and the see-through goggles. I definitely prefer this one over Torpedo's. And lastly, we come to the thing that just absolutely irks every deep part of my being. I have never liked droopy weapons. Ever since I was a child, I couldn't stand it when a gun or sword was warped or out of shape. and this one looks downright derpy. I would say that it fills me with impotent rage, but the spear of this gun has already got that covered, and at the end of this video, I'm going to do something about it. Alright, now that we've looked at everything, let's assemble him. The dive helmet fits easily over his head, and the figure's eyes can readily be seen through the faceplate. The backpack attaches to the back through a peg, and the 2 oxygen hoses peg into the backpack. The only additional thing I'd like to see here would be some sort of peg for the spear gun. But that's not a deal breaker, as the gun does have a wristband to attach it to the figure when he's not using it. Next we have the fins, which fit over his toes snugly and actually have a backstrap to keep them attached onto the heel. I can't tell you how happy this little bit of engineering makes me. I absolutely hate it when accessories constantly drop off while you're trying to pose the figure, and many other companies would just go with a friction design that slips over the foot, sending you scurrying under the table every time one lets go. And lastly, we have that nasty looking knife, which fits snugly into the lower leg sheath. Now that our eel is completely ready for action, let's take a look at his stats. Gear, role, skill, and mastery. I really kind of wish that a legend map poster came with at least one of these figures, and I may print one out in the future just for quick reference. The figure is supposed to be 6 foot 2 inches tall, and his role is Environmental Specialist, Water, Level 2. Gear, arrow weapons, Level 1, but maybe he would be a Level 2 with a straight spear gun. Skill and mastery, Explosives, Level 1. Skill and mastery, Underwater Combat, Level 2. Now that we know his proficiencies, let's take a look at him in action. First released in 1985 as part of Series 4 in the G.I. Joe 3-inch lineup, the Cobra EEL was not an individual character, but more part of Cobra's general underwater infantry, so it's definitely a figure that lends itself to troop building, which is where it's really strange that Hasbro still hasn't caught up with the demand, as I would think that they would have released this one in much higher numbers. Like I said before, I really love the retro aesthetic, and the color scheme is quite striking. The details are great, and the figure definitely pays proper homage to its original. And my only major complaint about it is that spear gun, which is where I wish Hasbro would take a page from Valaverse and cast their weapons in a more rigid plastic, especially with one like this that just couldn't be repaired with heat or reshaping. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it to keep its proper shape. I don't know if they think it's mostly a child market for these, and they need the weapons to be a soft plastic for choking or stabbing hazards, but it really destroys the aesthetic. In the end, this figure was a PR misstep by Hasbro, but nothing compared to the one coming down the pipeline, which is, at the height of the classified line's popularity, figures 99, 100, and 101 will have required you to have backed a HasLab campaign more than a year previously. And Hasbro has also been all over the place with their number releases. Collecting these is sort of like a game of whack-a-mole. Out of the blue, Big Bad Toy Store has Helix and Buzzer, number 104 and 106, and yet number 80, Nunchuck, will not see stateside release until the end of the month. Hasbro is definitely not releasing these figures in a way that's easy to count on or comprehend, and the sheer volume of releases from September to December feels really lopsided. But they did address this during the last PulseCon, so we will see if the releases over 2024 are both more chronological and spread out through the year evenly. I'm glad that this series is finding its footing, and hope that in the years to come, we see both a lot more vehicles and some of the stranger figures the line is famous for, but for right now, I'm really liking this Unholy Diver, and I hope that the recently announced retro version lives up to this one, but with a straighter spear and is more easily found. Now, how did I solve my spear gun problem? Well, the first thing I did was run to Hobby Lobby and get some small copper tubes from their modeling department. My idea was I wanted to inlay a piece of metal along the entirety of the gun so that it would help keep its shape. So I pulled out a tiny drill bit, sliced off the bolt head, and started drilling through the plastic to create a shaft to thread the copper tube into. After I created a long enough shaft, I cut away some of the top portion of the spear gun so that you could see the bolt. After the entire thing was inserted, I glued the original spearhead to the front of the copper tube. A word of caution, the drilling has to be done extremely slowly because of how soft the plastic is. But if you're patient with it, drilling out the length of the spear gun isn't actually that difficult. In the end, this solved my issue with rigidity, but I would rather not have to operate on weapons in the future. So I hope that this is the last droopy weapon we see. Now I really hope that you enjoyed this entry and are excited to see future G.I. Joe content as I complete out the classified checklist. If there's anything that you'd like to see me address in the classified line, please don't hesitate to make a comment or shoot me a message. And again, if you like this content, please help us grow by suggesting these episodes to those in your local G.I. Joe community, or tell YouTube you're a fan by liking the video and of course subscribing. And as always, remember, never stop collecting.